Welcome back to another episode of Divorce at Altitude. This is Ryan Kalamaya. We are continuing our series. It's a mini series on financial advice and wealth management. In today's episode, we're going to talk about socially responsible investing and what that all means. In this week, we're joined with a guest, an Aspen, Colorado native. We'll get into that, as well as a financial advisor to talk about socially responsible investing, Coley Cassidy. Before we really kind of get in, Coley, what's going on?
Well, happy to see the snow flying here on October 26th in Aspen, and it's a great time to be enjoying the beauty of our region here, and with the season shift, always allows me to be grateful for the ability to live and work here.
Yeah, before we started recording, we were talking about I just gotten back from Moab from a trip for fall break. But yeah, you can really start to feel that change. And we're going to talk about change because, divorce brings with it change. And with that, we can dive into socially responsible investing. Before we begin, let's talk about your kind of story. You grew up in Aspen, right?
I did, yes. So I'm 51 years old. I was born here in 1970. And my wife, incidentally, is also an Aspen native. I left home at about 15 to play competitive ice hockey in high school, in college, and then I played professionally in Europe before moving to New York City for about 15 years. And what I did in New York was essentially institutional investment, so essentially working with sophisticated investment managers. In 2008, when my wife and I had 4 daughters, we decided it was time to move back here to raise our kids in this beautiful place. But professionally allowed me to get transition from the institutional investment world to the family investment advisory world, which was a really, really interesting shift for me and something I wanted to do because it really allowed me, Ryan, to not only work on the investment side with people, but really work more towards what was important to families, what was important to people, and help them lead them down a path of discovery to not only for financial fulfillment through investments, but also truly understanding their values and aligning their lives along with their values.
Yeah, you and I have talked about kind of our travels respectively in Europe and playing collegiate sports. I think it really is something that is at least a foundation for my work. My wife and I are both Colorado natives. You guys are full Aspen natives, and we're kind of a rare breed, around these parts. But great to get to know you. So let's dive in and talk about socially responsible investing. Before we, really talk about substantively, I think it would be helpful for our audience to kind of define what exactly is socially responsible investing. So can you talk to me about that word and what it composes so that people understand what we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question, really important because I really don't think it's well understood in today's world, even though that, the SRI, socially responsible investing, and then ESG, environmental, social, and governance, those acronyms are being thrown around a lot today. But essentially what it is, Ryan, is if I use ESG as an example, environmental, social, and governance, it's essentially, it's a framework for investing that essentially came about in the 1980s and 1990s, and using the example of apartheid in South Africa, it was essentially a way for institutions to use their capital for a common good. And that in that example, most of your viewers here, I think, are going to be familiar with apartheid, and it was essentially stakeholders in South Africa. So there would be institutional investment managers, corporations that operated in South Africa, as an example, were pushing for change because the apartheid regime was clearly not appropriate, not humane, not right in any sense of the imagination for today's world. And so what they did was they came together to create a much more robust process by which they could by which they could apply pressure to make change. And what happened there was a massive divestiture campaign in South Africa, essentially helped topple the apartheid government, make the changes that were made at that time. But that's a great example of really, when we look at environmental social governance, that would be a social approach to a social issue in South Africa. And it'd be a governance issue because it's essentially applying pressure to force governance to make changes and using that governance position with their capital to make a change. So that hopefully sets the framework for then what has been an evolution since that time across so many different things now globally. And if we look at it closer to home, I didn't talk about the environmental piece earlier, but the environmental piece is critical here because of climate change. And plus, we're a beautiful, incredible, pristine, natural environment here. But it's that environmental piece where now not only preserving the beauty and pristine nature of native lands as an example, but obviously climate change. I mean, just within the increase in temperatures around the globe and the impact that's having. So ESG now is really being applied in so many different areas around the world to really target designated changes. And the real key piece of it is it's using capital to make that change. It's using the voice of capital to force change because capital is a stakeholder in most organizations around the world.
Right. And I think that, when we talk about these concepts, in my mind, for our audience, it relates to two different main areas. And the first is that oftentimes we will have a client who does not understand what her husband and her own, or what the parties own. And because there's traditionally one person that is in charge of the money, and then when someone goes through a divorce, they have to then educate themselves on what all is out there. So if someone owns SRI or has this strategy, then at least they can understand it more based on this episode and your guidance. But more importantly, it's after the divorce is finalized when someone might have that change of or really kind of prioritize their values and implement the money that they may receive in a divorce towards something that is different than what was the case in the marriage, and that they can independently, whether and you've heard our podcast. I mean, we have this hypothetical of Eric and Melanie Wolf, that if Eric decides that he's had this watershed moment in his life, a divorce, that he might want to change his investment strategy. So with that in mind, how you mentioned impact, how does one determine their impact values, or what the values that they're going to implement when devising some sort of strategy with their capital?
Yeah, great questions, and thanks for setting that up. It's fascinating. I would say that the one key piece of the scenario you laid out of with Eric and Melanie Wolf is critical, and it happens every day in this industry all the time. So I'll take two parts to that. The first one would be a spouse who does not know what investments they have. That is just very common. I've been in this industry for 15 years on the private family side. And it's very, very common, the overwhelming majority of cases in which I work, that one of the spouses doesn't necessarily need to be the husband or the wife, but one of the spouses is not familiar with what those investments are. And what investments tend to be, which leads to my second point, is they tend to be just traditional portfolios that are generally put together by a friend or a financial advisor or a firm. And in today's world, most of those investments do not have an ESG or SRI, socially responsible investing, tilt. If they do, they've tended to be done by the advisor, where they may put the client in a fund that is an ESG fund. But in no way in that entire process I just laid out does the individual's own values, are they reflected in their portfolio? And this is really the holy grail, Ryan. And the reason is because the evolution of the industry now is such that you can customize along the values of your core values. So the way that we do it at my firm, which is Tiedemann Advisors, is essentially we take our clients, whether we tend to prefer having both spouses, but an individual. It doesn't really matter with whomever we're working. I mean, for my current clients, it's grandparents, parents, grandchildren who are inheriting assets or named in trusts or whatever that may be. Essentially, we take them through an impact discovery process that is essentially a question, a detailed questionnaire about their thoughts about, what do they care most about, right? Do they care about the environment? Do they care about social causes? Do they care about gender issues? Do they care about women's issues? Do they care about animals or do they care about the creative industry, the artistic world, etc. And through that process that really has nothing to do with investments, it just more has to do with personal values that people, they have both here and here, So once we get that, we'll take the output from that discovery process and we'll create a customized portfolio that is properly allocated across, all asset classes to reflect exactly what those values are. And then at the end of every year, we will show them an impact measurement report, which will essentially say if the goal is essentially a low carbon portfolio, be how much carbon has been sequestered or removed or, relative to a relevant benchmark. And if we use, gender issues as an example, it'll be like how much of the investments in their portfolio have helped to add, women to publicly traded company boards or helped to advance women-only businesses or minority-owned businesses as an example. So the key piece is it allows, we're so used to in the industry is saying, okay, let's say the investments are up 10%. Great. That's the financial return. But what's not done in the mainstream today is, okay, there's a 10% financial return, but what's the impact return? How much of an impact has that capital made? And it obviously depends on the family. If it's a smaller family, great, they've made that impact. But the clients we're working with, which tend to be ultra high net worth families and their foundations, these are large pools of money. They can really move the needle to a large degree. And so, hopefully that process, it's very straightforward, but it really then allows people to say at the end of every year, are my values being answered by my capital? And does this feel good, or do I want to tweak or change or what have you? And I would say 9 times out of 10, Ryan, that basically family members want to get more engaged. They want to lean in further. They want more involved in their, in their family foundation or a donor advised fund or volunteering. And this is a key piece that I'm going to finish on. And I do a lot of this in my work, is that people want to feel, they want to feel fulfilled, personal happiness, family happiness. And if people are coming off of a divorce, that's a rebound time in their lives. Right. So searching within to say, how am I going to feel good? This allows people to be their best selves in a really unique way that most people have never even thought of, let alone heard of. And it gives them a whole new avenue with which to sort of approach their lives. And it's holistic, so it really encompasses all aspects of their, their, as we say, quantifiable, which is investment, but also the qualifiable things in their lives, which are the softer issues and friendships and organizations, and just allowing allow them to lead the life that they want to lead.
Yeah, two points to that really resonate with me, or that that when you're talking, I thought of. One is that process of sitting down with family and really asking them what they want and developing their strategy in terms of the impact is pretty similar to how we work as divorce lawyers when we sit down. I mean, earlier today, I had a conversation with a client where we discussed, do you want to be aggressive? Do you want, or are the kids a priority? Not that they're mutually exclusive, but how much do you want to push? And do you want to know every, stone has been unturned, or are you more cost conscious? And, really laying out what a person wants and examine, because oftentimes people, they haven't thought about that and directly confronted, which is a similar process for you in terms of how do we make an impact, and it's going to be customized. And so, some person is going to really, the children are going to be the most important thing. And so they're going to want the divorce process to be really, that is the number one priority. And then, on the other hand, someone might be very financially driven. And, for you, you guys can like really look at the returns, and we can, as a divorce lawyer, I can really look at the monetary value, but it's harder to quantify what impact that has on the family dynamics that are really important to those people. It's just a matter of how important are they.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and we're in very similar roles. I mean, I liken it to skiing in backcountry or skiing big mountains, where being a guide as a ski guide. It's just this guidance that you're providing, and a lot of people haven't necessarily had that guidance in your world or in my world as well. And the
Right.
guidance is so critical, because really the idea is you can sort of help create outcomes, but it really depends on what they want. So the push is really to help them, like I said, leading them down that path of discovery, help them come to some of these conclusions based on, again, their heart and their mind, and thinking about their families. And that's what struck me about, the world we're in today, is there's not a lot of really good, ways in which people receive guidance. And that's what you do, and that's what we do. And I find it really, really compelling, because I tend to have an idea where I think they need to be based on what they've said, but they'll tend to say one key thing that's a response to questions. Say, you know what, that's the most important thing, and based on that, here's where we're going to align on that. And I think that process, the same with you, is it allows them to learn more about themselves and learn more about what's really important to them, as well as what's important to their kids.
Right. And I think the second point that when you were talking, and this kind of leads into the segue of why it's so powerful to align, values with investment capital, but that for us, we use a lot of technology and within our firm, and we'll get a report. For example, there's a text expander program that we use where we send an email to the client that lays out that, we're set for trial. Here are the deadlines. It's really long. And we don't type that out every single time. We have kind of a coding that says fill in the blank, and we have different protocols for witness, like witness tips or other things that commonly come up. But at the end of the month, we get a report back from the software company where, we saved 5 hours of time, and it really quantifies those savings, which is unique. And it's similar to what you have, is at the end of the year, you can really measure how much of an impact people are making with their money, which I think is very unique, given what I've observed with in investment advisors, with what you guys do in really quantifying that impact.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's really interesting that you guys use that, because technology can certainly play a role. I think that the really interesting thing about the ESG world today is, we spend a lot of time in the financial press, and there's trillions of dollars invested along impact strategies today, but what you really don't see very much of at all is how much of a positive impact is that capital having. It's really the most important thing, right? It may be invested. And the reason is there's not a lot of ways to quantify it. So when you talk about technology at your firm, the technology that we're implementing is a tremendous amount of work to actually measure impact. It's not easy. It takes capital, it takes time, and we've created a proprietary process that does that. But I can also say that at the end of the year, when someone sees it, for the example of someone who is environmentally driven, reducing the carbon, reducing carbon in a portfolio relative to what the same benchmark would provide. And in most of those instances, it's 75% reduction. People feel really good about that if that's what their value is. And so you bring up a great point in terms of the need for innovation, the need to help our clients with what they want to achieve. So that's a really critical piece. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, and you and I talked previously about the impact and the role of culture and, communities and local communities. So for someone that is coming out of divorce and they're really wanting that meaningfulness. And I agree with you. I think that is something that a lot of people are searching for, and in particular in when they're going through a divorce. They really want to have some meaningfulness. And what could an example be of how they could invest their money to make an impact in local community, with the arts or culture or something in that range, which could be seen as a socially responsible investment strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would start by saying that if we look at someone's balance sheet, let's just use their investable assets, right? You have stocks and bonds or publicly traded, investments, and then you have private investments that can also have an impact strategy, and then you also have philanthropy. Wealthy families tend to be philanthropic, sometimes for tax reasons, or generally tax reasons, but generally also values reasons. And then we have a fourth component of a balance sheet, and that would be, it's called catalytic investments. And those bottom two pieces, catalytic investments and philanthropy, play a really, really key role to answer your question. Because when we do the discovery process and we create a custom, allocation framework for a family, the investment piece we've taken care of, all that's pretty straightforward, and we'll allocate that. But the philanthropy piece would be, based on what their values are. They may already give. Let's just use the Aspen Art Museum as an example. They may be a benefactor at the Aspen Art Museum, or they may volunteer time at Anderson Ranch as an example. In this piece of the puzzle, so they clearly have that value in their heart, that they believe in the organizations, they believe in the missions, and there's a reason they want to spend that time. And by the way, the reason they want to spend that time is it makes them feel good. And making people, making themselves feel good is a really critical piece of the equation. But when we go to this catalytic piece, this is really a brand new component of impact investing. What catalytic refers to is it is a step above philanthropy, where philanthropy, obviously, you're just giving money, right? It's a gift.
Right.
Catalytic is the ability to allocate capital towards, let's just use the creative economy as an example. So giving towards the creative economy, of which the Art Museum and Anderson Ranch are both part of the creative economy, but it allows them to allocate capital towards the creative economy, and then that capital has a partially philanthropic component to it, but it also has a return component, so it can generate a positive return as well. And what that tends to be, just using the creative economy example again, is it would be like a community development finance institution, a CDFI. It essentially would raises capital and then loans out that capital to different projects in the creative economy. So really popular examples of that tend to be let's use this valley as well. The CDFIs have allocated capital towards arts and cultural institutions up and down the Roaring Fork Valley. Right. And so the client can earn a return on that. It's not going to be a market-based return in general, but it's going to be a return that also is tied in with the mission that person has found to be important to them. And what we find, to sort of finish the point in your question, is that process of both volunteering and philanthropy, and then this catalytic piece, as long as the global portfolio that's allocated towards sort of a socially responsible investing piece, that allows them to really get involved in more things that they probably did not have access to. And when they're involved in those organizations, they tend to meet people who are aligned. They tend to find people who help challenge them in terms of their values, their thoughts, and it tends to perpetuate into long-term visions of support. And you see this in a community like this. A lot of people have gotten involved in these things for these exact reasons, but they may have just found different ways to achieve them. But hopefully that creates just what the entire picture of assets to be. But a large part of what I said has nothing to do with the money. It really has to do with the time, the devotion, and essentially the purpose and value. So you asked about the purpose. That really helps people find a purpose. And people in your world who are getting a divorce, I think the key there is just this rebound. This is your world more so than mine, but I've worked with a lot of divorce divorced people as well. And that piece in helping them find that new world is really critical. So to marry both the capital and the values is a pretty special thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it reminds me, I mean, David Brooks, the New York Times
Sure.
and Atlantic columnist, he's got, a book that I really enjoyed, The Second Mountain. And it kind of really gets into climbing that first mountain, whether it be professional or whatever it is. And then you kind of get to the top and you're like, is this it? I don't really feel that fulfilled. And then it's climbing that second mountain. So it's the Bill Gates going out with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and these other examples. And so you can do it on a smaller scale, but your firm and you will help people, if they're really looking to climb that second mountain, to help them make a difference. And it could be through investing their time but investing their money.
Yeah, absolutely. And David Brooks is great. He's a great American philosopher. But I would say another interesting piece is that we look at, tax law right now, there's, a lot of ongoing, potential legislative changes to the current tax code, which I know you're well familiar. But as an example to that, we've helped clients create family foundations, which is an example of really a powerful way to embody all the things that you and I just discussed within, their own foundation, which can involve the entire family in that process. Donor advised funds are another great way to do it, but you also end up coming back to, you mentioned it with kids, and divorced couples obviously, generally have children as well. That alignment with their kids is really powerful. In my professional experience, I have experienced, and this is a new topic, but I think a very, very important one. For families of wealth that may want to transfer wealth to younger generations, that's again, that's a technical tax purpose. But the important piece there is making sure that kids are responsibly educated to inherit wealth. And that has been, you read through the textbook of just failures and with money and families. Most of those have to do with unprepared heirs in terms of receiving wealth. But another huge component of that unpreparedness has to do with that those kids have not gone through that same discovery process. Oh, and by the way, their impact values in today's world may be very different than mom or dad or grandma and grandpa, because these kids are really bright. They're very well plugged into, obviously the world with social media and the internet, et cetera. But they also have really different value systems. It's a generational thing. Millennials, Gen Z, they're different, but it's really, really critical here to engage them as well. And I think the alignment of your world and my world, Ryan, too, is I can promise you that one of your outcomes you'd like to have for your clients is happiness, right? Is fulfillment. And so back to the second mountain, it's not only money. I mean, you tend to be focused on money, but I think it's really life fulfillment. And having kids, grandkids, your family that is fulfilled. So these exercises, I mean, this is sort of the real key piece for my profession and what I do and how we do it, is if you can wrap them all into the same piece, the process, where the outcome is a financial outcome, but it's a family values outcome. And you help families understand that the process of creating family mission statements, the process of having annual family meetings, the process of inviting all the family members to have a voice that everybody needs to listen to and respect. A lot of families don't have that. They're used to one person sort of dictating. So this really gets into almost the sociological or psychological components, but you don't need a PhD to be doing this, because these are really team building exercises that are geared towards alignment and movement down a path. And I have found that the engagement of the younger generations is absolutely phenomenal and really, really interesting to gauge their values and their questions.
Yeah, I think you make a great point and really paint an optimistic picture. Some people, they come up to me and they're like, Ryan, I listened to your podcast, but man, it was so depressing. But for you, Coley, you can paint the picture of, if Eric and Melanie are going through a divorce, and Melanie decides that this is really important to her. She wants to implement some sort of social responsible investing strategy. what I'm hearing you say is that you will see Melanie engage her children. And you've got high school and college age girls. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old, and I'm kind of going through teaching my kids what money is, and how
Sure.
what investments, like here in Aspen, the protect our winners, the POW stickers are on the back of the bus, and they ask like, what is that, Dad? And so for you, it's a matter of sitting down with Melanie and her kids, no matter if they're my kids' age, which might be a little bit early, but really talking to them, and creating a new plan, and developing that mission statement. And whether it be that, if we're talking about family foundations, or there's definitely levels. And Amy, my partner, had a recent podcast where David Kopp, they talked about how much is enough, and that is the big question in divorce. But the next step is, after you decide how much is enough, then it's, what do you do with that? And for you, it's really engaging that family, the entire family, and it could be up and down generations, to develop that plan, to figure out if it's environmental causes or something, that is something that you guys can help them realize their goals.
Absolutely. Those are all great points. And yeah, the answer is absolutely. And, in my experience, the money gets in the way because people are afraid to share too much with their kids. I mean, every single person, almost 100% that I've dealt with, and you hear of anecdotally too, does not want to, they don't want to, sort of breed entitlement amongst the kids. And so I have a slightly different view on that, because my experience has been that is not the case. And including them on financial matters is really actually very critical. The kids are smart. They get it. They know it's not their money in general. But forget about money for a second, because and I've learned a tremendous amount from the great Jay Hughes, who's really the high dean of family wealth advisory, who's terrific, and actually resides here in Aspen, but also a woman named Christine Carter, who is a PhD sociologist who I've studied with for the past decade, and then a woman named Jill Shipley, who's on our team, who does family governance and education work too, and it's phenomenal. These folks tend to all draw from the same body of research, and the research is such that process of connecting with your family, and the things I indicated are sort of 4 pieces that tend to not really be well known, but they include the ability to have individuated kids that are allowed to sort of be themselves, right? Number one. Number two, they're allowed to have a voice and be listened to and respected to what their voice is. The third thing that is really critical is the idea that they are part of something that is bigger than themselves, which tends to be the family. And then what the net result is you're really trying to just improve and just sort of optimize the family, the family process. And if you agree to create a family mission statement, which is an awesome exercise for everybody to go through, where everybody gets a voice and has the ability to have input there, and then do an annual family meeting, just doing those things right there, Ryan, is incredible in terms of what that does. That then leads to, this impact portfolio that is aligned with the values, because people are talking about what their values are. And then it also leads to, by the way, like where are we going to give this year for our philanthropy? I tend to encourage families to all have a desired charity and respect the charity for each one of those family members for what the reasons are. So the fact that the kids have agency is really, really critical. And so these things tend to come together quite easily if the process for which you're following is done in a way that helps them arrive at that end goal. And so I think for your, for clients of yours, that process that you take them down is critical and a part of that. And this would just be an extension to really helps them sort of just rebound and create. And it tends to really maintain a really positive focus too, which I find is just a really important component. Really focusing on something that you care about and keep the perspective in a really positive fashion. And impact is a positive thing, right? It's trying to create a positive impact in the world.
Yeah, I think that really resonates with me because often, and I think it will with members of our audience, whether they're going through a divorce or they're divorce professionals, but to really challenge and encourage people to think about what they are doing with their time, with their money, with their relationships. And that is just what you kind of covered in a mission statement. It can be different things. I mean, our firm last year, and we're going to continue it this year, is we asked our clients and valued partners, people that are kind of friends of the firm that are referral sources and friends of our firm, is what is it that they value, because we want to contribute on their behalf. We can get them gift baskets of fruit and pears, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but last year what we asked is, what's the charity that is that you're passionate about, because we're going to make a donation on your behalf, and we're going to do that this year. And it's in part because I think you have identified, I mean, our firm, it's made up of mostly millennials, and that is something that is really important from a generational standpoint, that they really, I mean, our employees want to feel that they're engaged, but also our clients. And I think that trickles down to someone, when they're going through a divorce, can really examine their values, and they don't even have to be going through a divorce. They can really, you've kind of motivated me to think about sitting down with my family and kind of developing a mission statement and really figuring out what we're going to do. And it sounds like you guys have a structured process for new clients that you really help them determine what their values are.
Yeah, we do, and I'm glad to let's remain in touch on that. I think that's great, and I'd love to take you through that. And I want to give you kudos for your firm, because you said one really critical piece, or that what you laid out there, is your firm's values. I mean, that's really important. Along this whole conversation, clients want to, when they're in this exploratory discovery process, they examine all facets of their relationships. I mean, they're just probably coming out of a divorce where they've examined their spouse and the things that haven't gone right. But they're they want to surround themselves with alignment of values. And having a firm, and you guys have a local firm, you're doing what you just said, which is phenomenal. And in our world, I mean, we're a partnership, we're a boutique. We're now global though too, so we have offices around the world. But our biggest competitors tend to be huge firms, publicly traded companies. And I think nothing against the publicly traded companies, but it's the local relationship and also that alignment of values. I know it's really critical for the families that become clients of ours about knowing who we are. And we have, a firm mission statement. Diversity, equity, inclusion is one of our firm's 5 values. And it's up to us to live the values. And it's my responsibility to live these values here in my community, just like my partners are in London or Geneva. And so you bring in a key piece, because it boils down to the values and those relationships. So that is, it's amazing how much of what we're talking about is really a key piece to people to be their best selves as they move forward. And one thing that really is so interesting about Aspen, as an example too, is the pandemic has certainly accelerated the move of people to be spending more time here and wanting to spend the time here, and Colorado for that matter too. I mean, the state, right? There's a lot of tailwinds in the state. You're obviously a native here too, right? But a big part of those is because people are wanting to live their values, be in a place that I think being a purple state here is really interesting, right? Because there's less political rancor, low net tax regime, but people allow them to be living their values in a way that there's mind, body, and spirit, right? The Aspen idea. And I think that piece that's a big part of it, is because they're trying to find that. That's that second mountain piece that David Brooks is probably talking about. Part of it's in here and as well. So good points.
Yeah, I think that some people could say, oh, that's, really woo woo. And, you're not the right fit for me, whether it be from an investment strategy for you guys or a divorce standpoint. I mean, we are not, our firm is not the best fit for someone that wants, the traditional, like, we're the strong arm and we've got 1,000 years of experience and we're just going to fight. I mean, we see that on TVs. I mean, how you can pick them out. And that's not who our firm is. And it's, you guys have been doing the socially responsible investing, the SRI, for much longer than, anyone else, comparatively speaking. So can you talk a little bit about that history and your guys' approach and why that was, something that was developed by Tiedemann from the kind of get-go?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's so the Russell family is a family based in Gig Harbor, Washington, most famously known for the Russell investments. There's Russell indices in the world of, the Russell small cap, growth index. And so that's where the name comes from. But the family basically sold their investment firm roughly 15 years ago. And they decided to create a fully impact activated, family, sort of family balance sheet. Because in that part of the world, which probably is no surprise, I mean, there's really a massive environmental impact awareness in the Pacific Northwest, and has been for a long period of time. And so they said, we are going to, leave our core business and focus our entire time and energy on environmental impact. And so they were really, I think, would be considered one of the first families in the United States to create the full, the fully environmentally impacted portfolio, or impact activated portfolio. And so the Russell family is a client firm, is a client of our firm, is also a partner in the firm. And so we get the incredible benefit of having the firm and their members and their investment committee, their chief investment officer, their foundation board member, is really close resources of the firm. And it's also just been, fascinating to see, roughly 20 years of this, down to, just the mistakes that have been made, to, investments that are not available for, sort of general capital. And so they've helped to not only be a pioneer in doing that for themselves, but help really open up doors for other families and create, there's a very, very, powerful environmental family network amongst foundations around the US that we're, grateful to be a part of. But it boils down to that, just the common connection with them and their network of people. So it's really been great for my education to be able to sort of start at day one with, 20 plus years of experience with them on that.
Yeah, and in wrapping up, if people are interested in finding out more, are there any books you mentioned, research and studies and just kind of coming up to speed, personally for you? And are there any kind of books or resources that you think, people would benefit from?
So I would say the answer is yes. I think I'll say two things. Number one, on the books, there's some terrific books, including there's one that I think is a really a seminal tome called "The Purpose of Capital," and it's written by a person named Jed Emerson, who's our director of impact investments. And it's fascinating, Ryan, because it essentially goes back and looks at literally the purpose of capital. Capital meaning money, capital. Over the past 5,000 years, and essentially looks at how is money looked at in terms of what's the purpose of money over millennium. The only downside is it's a relatively thick book. It's pretty intense, but The Purpose of Capital is phenomenal because today we forget that that people have had money since the beginning of time. And there are incredibly powerful stories about what families and people have done with that capital to make impact in their communities around the world. It's that one is really critical. And then the other one I would mention is one called Generation Impact. And it's by two authors, Goldseeker and Moody. They're pioneers in the world of empowering next generation, or we call rising generations, in the value of impact. And what it does is essentially talks about just the differences of these younger generations and how much more engaged they tend to be on impact. But it's a really, really cool read. So those would be two. And then please feel free to share my info. There's a lot of research I can share. There's so much about it, but glad to tailor that to anybody's interest.
Yeah, we'll have links to those books in the show notes, as well as your info. But for people that are listening or watching, how and they they want to find out more about Tiedemann and Coley, you personally, how can they reach out to you? What's the best place?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. TiedemannAdvisors.com. Just look at the website. Our contact info is on there. Our office right down 520 East Hyman, right across from Clark's Oyster Bar up on the second floor. So we're local, we're a local business here as well. And my partner, Tricia Cunningham, and she has phenomenal experience working with non-financial spouses, and she has a terrific expertise in this area too. So we'd be glad. These things are all about conversations because everybody's situation is different, and we love having conversations. And it may not be the right fit for us, and that doesn't matter because it can help point you in the right direction and empower you with some interesting things to think about. So I would absolutely invite anybody to reach out to us. We'd love to talk, and we're all about the community too. We love hearing what people have going on, and we're like you, Ryan. We're trying to support different areas and want to get behind anything that helps the community be a better place.
Indeed. Well, Coley, until next time, thanks for educating me, and I'll be in touch on my family's mission statement. But thank you for joining us. I learned a lot, really enjoyed it, and I know our audience will appreciate the info as well. So thank you.
Absolutely, Ryan. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and great to see you again. Look forward to staying in touch. Thanks, everybody.
Indeed.